I want to welcome you here today, but I also want to welcome those of you that are listening to us and streaming on the web, and those of you that may pick up this presentation at some later point in time. It's a great opportunity to tell you something about NeuRA, what we do, what we stand for. And so I'm going to start that off by showing a very brief highlights video from the work that we've been doing over the last year. So from that brief video, you saw something of what we do. We want to discover, conquer and cure. We want to make those discoveries that will allow us to actually make an improvement to the conditions that affect us and our families. We do that, we work in a whole range of areas. We work in mental health. You've seen something today of the programs in schizophrenia. We do work on resilience, on bipolar disorder. We work in movement and muscle control. For example, you saw today some of the work on contracture, how that impacts recovery after stroke, but also in another project that's currently underway, how it affects kids with cerebral palsy. So again, more practical ways of better understanding, making those discoveries so that we can translate those results. We do work in injury. We've got some major new announcements that will be coming over the balance of this year in spinal cord injury research. The field has really blossomed and there are some exciting opportunities coming. The other area we do is injury falls prevention, and so you picked up today in Matt Brody's presentation the work on falls and movement in Parkinson's. But more generally, falls in the elderly are a huge problem, and so if we can actually do things that make a practical difference to help people stop falling and not having to fracture a hip, go to hospital, that is life-saving. At the other end, we do work on injury, and of course our brains, our spinal cords are our most vulnerable organs, the least able to regenerate, and so protecting them is crucial. Car child seats and the improvements we've seen in car child seat legislation in the last decade are substantively the result of our research. The legislation that changed around 2010 to 12, so it's been 5 years now, has resulted in a 40% reduction in child deaths and a commensurate reduction in injury. That means there are kids that are alive today because some of our researchers said we can do this better. Government listened to the results and implemented those policy changes. And our final area, our final big portfolio of area and work is in neurodegenerative conditions. And so that brings us to today's particular focus. We work in Parkinson's, we work in studying brain degenerative conditions through the Sydney Brain Bank. We work particularly in dementia. Karen Anstey, who you saw featured on that video, has a particular focus on the things we can do to try to help prevent dementia at a lifestyle and population level. But we also have other studies participating in international clinical trials looking at dementia prevention. So quite a spread of things. And it's sadly, that's the reason why we're looking at Jeannie Little, because Jeannie is living with Alzheimer's. And that is a challenge for so many of us in the community, living with dementia in its many different forms. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia, which is why we hear of it most frequently, but by far not the only cause of dementia.
Being what I am, and if you don't like it, I don't give a hoot. Darling, are you paying attention? Darling, will you listen to me? I'm not.
Jeannie Little was just iconic in Australian television history. She was unique in what she brought and how she could produce humour out of almost anything, including milk bottle tops. So we're very privileged today to have Jeannie's daughter, Katie, who has both brought some material from the wardrobe, and those of you that haven't looked very carefully, do inspect her necklace a little later on. Katie has been, she's been a carer, she's been a daughter with Jeannie, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. Katie very generously came and spoke at our major fundraising event this year, which was a treat, and we also had several of Jeannie's dresses on display and other memorabilia. Katie's written a really engaging book about her mum and life with her mum, so I can recommend that to you. And she's also being out there in the community, and this is one of those examples where she's working to raise the awareness of dementia and Alzheimer's in particular through sharing some of her experiences, both the sad parts of dementia, but also being positive about remembering all the really good things about those in our families, our loved ones that have lived with the condition. So I'm going to do no more than welcome Katie, to thank her so much for coming and visiting us again, and hand the stage over to her. Katie Little.
Thanks so much, Peter. It's just such a lovely treat to be here again today. As you can see, yes, I'm wearing something out of Mum's dress-up box, I call it. So if I get asked to do any talks or you know, fabulous events like this, I rummage around in Mum's wardrobe and pull out. And today, would you believe it, I just found out I dress as a macrophage, I think it's called, which is showing the link between inflammation of the brain and schizophrenia. I didn't even know, but that's apparently what I look like. It comes up on the screen. I thought I looked like a jellyfish, but that's fine. So look, the reason I'm here is Mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 12 or so years ago now, and at the time I had no experience with Alzheimer's before, and it was so easy to miss the signs with her because, you know, Mum called everyone darling and was really ditzy and everything like that. And the most wonderful thing that happened was that NeuRA came to me and said, would I like to start an Alzheimer's research fund under my mum's name and be patron of that? And I jumped at the chance because Mum always did so much work in charity, and finally I felt like I was doing something positive. Because Mum was such a positive and inspiring person, and, you know, really, you know, had such a determination with her sort of Scottish background, and sort of, she was a Tory, and so she was really stubborn. And so when she set her mind to something, you know, nothing could change her mind. So as soon as, you know, I jumped at the chance to sort of say, yes, I'd love to be part of putting together a Jeannie Little's Alzheimer's research fund with NeuRA is fantastic. So yeah, I thought, I'd actually tell a bit of a story. I did write a book that came out last year about telling, all these stories of growing up with my mum backstage. And because tomorrow is Friday the 13th, I thought I'd tell you a bit of a story about when I was little and my mum decided to throw a haunted house party for me. Really close friends of my parents had bought a totally decrepit terrace house down the street that looked like a haunted house, like it was all black and dusty with cobwebs and, dust everywhere and just hideous. And they all had this great idea and said, Katie, your birthday's coming up soon. Why don't we throw a haunted house party? And it turned out to be so fabulous, all the little kids were actually too scared, some of them, to come in the house. And my mum dressed up as a witch and my father put on this big sort of, gorilla ape suit sort of thing too, and mum had to go out the front and sort of say, take off the pointy nose and lift up the wig and say, it's really just me in here, come on, just come in and have a bit of fun. But one of the memories I can remember is before the party at home, my mum in the kitchen boiling all these huge big pots of water on the stove and my father coming in this gorilla suit sort of thing saying, what are you doing? We're running late. Come on, the party's starting soon. We have to go. And so mum was sort of, saying to me, quick, hold this garbage bag open. She did the amazing sort of, garbage bag promotion with all dresses made out of garbage bags at one point. So we always had millions of garbage bags in our house. So I remember mum saying, hold this garbage bag open, and she had, big rubber gloves on and she was pouring these huge pots of steaming spaghetti into the sink and then picking up huge handfuls and throwing it into these garbage bags and then pouring oil on the top and throwing all these party toys in. So, and the other thing she'd been doing is she'd been making jelly, and because the jelly had to set, it hadn't quite set, so she was panicking and putting buckets of jelly in the freezer to hurry up the setting the jelly. And so mum had thought that she'd put on party games, and so when the party sort of was happening a bit later, she said to all the little children, right, you all get into 2 rows, they're all sort of this high, and she said at the front there's 2 garbage bags and one is filled with worms and the other one is filled with slime, and you have to put your hand in and feel around until you find a toy, and then you can get a prize. But the problem is my mum had left it all to the last minute, so the spaghetti was still boiling hot and the jelly was so freezing cold that there were kids actually screaming in real pain as they put their hands in trying to find one of these little plastic toys. So finally, one kid would sort of go, I got one sort of thing, and bring up an arm sort of freezing purple with, freezing cold from being in this jelly too long. So look, these are the wonderful memories I can remember of growing up with my mother. She was sort of so unconventional and, just one of a kind, really. And so that's really why the signs of Alzheimer's, when they did start happening, it was so easily missed. And it wasn't until, Mum came to stay with me and I thought, I can do this. And I realised how utterly difficult it was and how very sick my mother was. And I knew that she had to go into care because I had 2 very small children and I couldn't cope. And then, after she was in care, I was in the position where I had to clean out my parents' apartment. And one of the jobs I had to do was Mum, had all these handbags. And so as a matter of course, I started just going through sort of the handbags and going through things. And in lots of them, I found these sort of little scraps of paper where Mum had written the names of people, which some of them were very close friends. And it suddenly dawned on me how absolutely terrifying and confusing it must have been for her when she didn't know what was wrong with her and she was forgetting the names of people who were family friends and having to run off into another room to write down their name on a piece of paper and put it in the handbag so she could remember. So look, there's just so much work to be done. It's so fantastic talking to the researchers every time I come here. The brain is like the final frontier because it's who we are. So I'm just so thrilled to be here this morning because, the statistics, it's Dementia Awareness Month as well, and the statistics of dementia, I think it's 400,000 people or something are living with dementia in Australia, and it's the number 2 cause of death in Australia and number 1 cause of death if you're a woman. So that just absolutely blows my mind. mind, and I am a chip off the old block, so really I'm terrified, you know, that I do go to see my mum in the nursing home and think, gosh, is this my future as well? So, you know, I think it's just so great to be here and, you know, working with all these fantastic researchers, and anything I can do to put my time, you know, towards this is just gold. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, I wonder what she'll pull out of the dress-up box next time, because we never saw any of that last time, and I've just realised they're actually matching earrings as well. But you know, as Katie said, the sobering reality is that it's estimated 435,000 Australians are living with dementia now. And as a community, we're ageing. So it is our potential biggest single health issue. That's why research is so important. Research to help delay onset, research that might provide new treatments, and more practical things about just how to manage living with dementia when you do have it. There's one of our researchers, Moira Mortby, has been doing a program working with staff in nursing homes in Canberra and helping them to be trained in managing clients in their homes who have behavioural problems, because that is one of the features that comes with dementia. Not everybody, but with some. And the experience from that program has been phenomenal, because the staff, who often are fairly modestly trained, now have some knowledge and understanding of what's going on, and it's helping them in managing their clients, their residents, and everybody is calmer and everybody is having a better time, even though it's not stopped their dementia, but it has reduced a lot of stress and anxiety for the residents, for the family members, and for the staff. So some very practical things. I'm going to, again, formally thank Katie. Thank you all for coming, and thank those of you that are watching on the live stream. It's been wonderful to have you join us here at NeuRA, and to see this amazing presentation of the life of Katie, of Jeannie Little, and the support thank Katie for the support that she's giving us.